Hansel Kim stood in the massive briefing hall of the Galactic Military Academy, surrounded by 200 cadets from across the known galaxy. The sight never failed to amaze him, even after 6 months at the academy. To his left towered a crystalline being from Altair Prime, its body refracting the artificial light into rainbow patterns across the walls. To his right, a small aquatic creature floated in a mobility suit filled with blue-green liquid, gills fluttering behind transparent aluminum. The Academy Station Concordia orbited a gas giant in the neutral zone between major galactic powers. Here, the brightest young minds from dozens of species came to learn the art of war, diplomacy, and survival. Hansel was one of only 12 humans in his class, representing a species that most of the galaxy still considered a dangerous curiosity. "Attention cadets," announced Instructor Veltar, her voice resonating through the hall with a musical quality that only her crystalline species could produce. She stood at the front of the room, her faceted body catching and throwing light in deliberate patterns that served as both communication and emphasis. "Today begins your survival training exercise on Zarian 7. Hansel straightened his posture. Though at average human height, he was shorter than many of his classmates. The Catherian cadets, with their insectoid exoskeletons, stood nearly 8 feet tall. The plant-based Verdanians swayed gently as they filtered nutrients from the air. Even the hydrants, aquatic as they were, possessed an alien grace that made Hansel feel distinctly out of place. This exercise will test your ability to survive in hostile environments while working with teammates whose biology differs drastically from your own, Tara continued. Her words carried the weight of authority earned through decades of military service. You will be divided into squads of 4, each containing cadets from different species. Your mission is simple: survive for 72 hours on the surface of Zarian 7, then reach your designated extraction point. The holographic display behind her showed the moon in question. Zarian 7 was a barren rock with an atmosphere barely thick enough to breathe for most species. Its surface was marked by deep canyons, jagged mountain ranges, and scattered impact craters from ancient asteroid strikes. The temperature swung from scorching heat during the day to freezing cold at night. The moon presents several challenges, Veltar explained as images flashed across the display. Oxygen levels are 30% below standard atmospheric conditions. Water sources are scarce and often contaminated. The local wildlife includes several predatory species that view anything moving as potential prey. Additionally, the rocky terrain makes navigation difficult, and the thin atmosphere provides little protection from solar radiation. Hansel listened carefully, already analyzing the challenges in his mind. Growing up on Earth had prepared him for harsh environments in ways that many of his classmates could never understand. Earth was what the galaxy called a death world, a planet so hostile that most species considered it uninhabitable. Humans had evolved in an environment where everything from the weather to the wildlife was actively trying to kill them. That's why assignments are now displayed on your personal devices, Veltar announced. You have 30 minutes to meet your teammates and review your mission parameters. Transport to Zarian 7 begins in 1 hour. Hansel checked his wrist display and felt a mix of excitement and concern. His squad consisted of himself, Nixura from the Hydrant Systems, Orthful from the methane-rich worlds of the Outer Rim, and Siloween from the garden worlds of the Verdanian Collective. Each of them required completely different environmental conditions to survive. He made his way to the designated meeting area, a small briefing room with adjustable atmospheric controls. Nixura was already there, floating in her mobility suit with its life-supporting aquatic environment. Her large, dark eyes tracked his movement as he entered, and she raised one webbed hand in greeting. "You are the human," she said, her voice carrying the fluid tones of her species. "I have heard much about your people, they say. You come from a world that would kill most of us in minutes." "That's probably true," Hansel replied with a slight smile. Okay. But Earth taught us to adapt. I'm hoping that experience will help our squad. Orthfell arrived next, his breathing apparatus making soft, hissing sounds as it filtered the station's oxygen-rich atmosphere and replaced it with the methane mixture his species required. His species resembled tall, thin humans, but with pale, almost translucent skin and large, dark eyes adapted for low-light conditions. I have reviewed the mission parameters, Orthfell said, his voice muffled by his breathing equipment. The atmospheric conditions on Zarian 7 will be challenging for all of us. My species requires methane to survive, but the moon's atmosphere contains only trace amounts. Finally, Silhouette entered the room, her plant-like form moving with a graceful swaying motion. She was beautiful in an alien way, with skin that shifted between green and gold depending on the light, and hair that resembled flowing leaves. Her species survived through photosynthesis, requiring specific wavelengths of light to maintain their health. The briefing materials indicate that Zarian 7 receives intense solar radiation during the day, she said, her voice carrying a rustling quality like wind through trees. This could be beneficial for my energy needs, but the lack of cloud cover means no protection from harmful radiation levels. Hansel looked at his three teammates and realized the challenge they faced. Each of them had evolved in completely different environments. What was beneficial for one could be deadly for another. The thin atmosphere that might help Silhouette absorb more solar energy would make it harder for Nyxara to maintain her mobility suit's systems. The cold nights that Orthfell might find comfortable would be dangerous for everyone else. Need to approach this differently than most squads, Hansel said, taking charge of the planning session. Instead of trying to find an environment that works for all of us, we need to create multiple microenvironments and move between them as needed. His teammates looked at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to skepticism. In the galactic community, humans were known for their unusual approaches to problem solving, but they were also viewed with suspicion because of their Deathworld origins. What do you propose? Nyxara asked, her aquatic eyes studying him intently. Use the terrain to our advantage, Hansel explained, calling up a detailed map of their landing zone on the room's display. These canyon systems provide natural shelter from radiation and wind. We can create different zones for different needs. During the day, Silhouette can position herself for optimal solar absorption, while the rest of us stay in shade. At night, we can use body heat and shelter to stay warm. And water? Orthfell asked. The briefing indicated that sources are scarce and often contaminated. Earth taught us dozens of ways to purify water, Hansel replied. Even with limited resources, we can make contaminated water safe to drink. The real challenge will be finding enough for all of us. The transport announcement echoed through the station, signaling that their departure time was approaching. Saul gathered his equipment, a standard survival kit that included basic tools, emergency rations, and a communication device. Unlike some of his classmates who carried advanced technological solutions, Hansel preferred simpler, more reliable equipment. As they made their way to the transport bay, Hansel noticed other cadets giving their squad curious looks. Mixed species teams were common at the academy, but the combination of a human with three species requiring such different environmental conditions was unusual. Some of the looks seemed sympathetic, as if the observers expected Hansel's squad to fail quickly. The transport ship was a sleek, military vessel designed for rapid deployment of personnel to hostile environments. As they strapped in for the journey to Zarian 7, Saul felt the familiar mix of nervousness and excitement that came before any challenging mission. His teammates were checking their equipment and reviewing the mission parameters one final time. Hansel Nyxara said as the transport prepared for departure, "May I ask you something about your homeworld?" "Of course," he replied. "Is it true that humans evolved alongside predators that could kill you with a single bite?" Hansel thought about the question seriously. "That's true. but we also learn to hunt those same predators. Earth taught us that survival isn't just about being strong or fast or having the best technology. It's about adapting, thinking creatively, and never giving up. As the transport ship detached from the station and began its journey toward Sarian 7, Hansel looked out at the stars and wondered what challenges awaited them on the moon's surface. He had no way of knowing that what was supposed to be a routine survival exercise would soon become something far more dangerous, testing not just their ability to survive, but their courage, ingenuity, and determination in ways that would echo across the galaxy. The routine exercise was about to become anything but routine. The transport ship descended through Sarian 7's thin atmosphere, buffeted by winds that howled across the moon's barren surface. Saw gripped his harness as the ship shook violently, watching through the viewport as the rocky landscape rushed up to meet them. The canyon system where they would land looked like a massive scar across the moon's face, carved by ancient geological forces. 30 seconds to drop, announced the pilot, his voice crackling through the comm system. Remember, cadets, this is a survival exercise. You have 72 hours to reach your extraction point. Good luck. Hansal's squad prepared for deployment. Nixara sealed her mobility suit systems and activated her backup life support. Orthfeld checked his breathing apparatus one final time, ensuring the methane mixture was flowing correctly. Silouan adjusted her protective covering, preparing for the harsh solar radiation that would greet them on the surface. The drop was sudden and jarring. One moment they were inside the transport, the next they were falling through the thin air toward the rocky canyon below. Hansal's training kicked in as he deployed his parachute, watching as his teammates did the same. The landing was rough, with loose rocks and unstable ground, making it difficult to maintain balance. Sound off, Hansel called out as he gathered his parachute. Everyone okay? My suit systems are functioning normally, Nixara replied, her mobility unit's legs adjusting to the uneven terrain, but the atmospheric pressure is lower than expected. I need to conserve power. Methane levels are insufficient, Orthvel reported, his breathing apparatus working harder to filter the available gases. I can survive for now, but I will need to find alternative sources soon. Aviation levels are intense, Silouan said, her plant-like skin already beginning to shimmer as she absorbed the harsh sunlight. I can handle it for now, but without proper shelter, it will become dangerous, even for me. Hansal surveyed their surroundings. The canyon walls rose high on both sides, creating natural barriers against the wind, but also limiting their movement options. The ground was covered with loose rocks and scattered with the bones of long-dead creatures. In the distance, he could see movement that suggested they were not alone on this moon. We need to find shelter and establish a base camp, Hansal decided. That overhang there looks promising. It will give us protection from the radiation and wind while we plan our next moves. The first few hours went according to plan. Hansal used techniques learned from Earth's harsh environments to create a shelter that provided different zones for each team member's needs. Positioned reflective materials to direct filtered sunlight to Silouan while creating shade for the others. Using basic chemistry, he began the process of purifying water from a nearby contaminated spring. How do you know these things? Nixara asked, watching as Hansel tested the water with simple chemical strips. Your species' technology is not advanced compared to others in the galaxy. Earth taught us to survive with whatever we could find, Hansel replied, adding purification tablets to the water. When your environment is constantly trying to kill you, you learn to make do with simple solutions that work. Everything changed 18 hours into the exercise. The ground began to shake with increasing intensity, starting as small tremors that grew into violent convulsions. The canyon walls groaned and cracked as seismic forces tore through the moon's crust. Earthquake. Hansel shouted over the growing noise. Everyone get to open ground. But there was no open ground. The canyon walls were collapsing, sending massive boulders crashing down around them. Hansel grabbed Nyxora's mobility suit and pulled her toward what looked like a cave entrance, hoping it would provide protection from the falling rocks. Cave entrance was their salvation and their doom. As they rushed inside, the earthquake's intensity increased, causing a massive section of the canyon wall to collapse. The entrance sealed behind them with tons of rock and debris, trapping them in complete darkness. "Is everyone alive?" Hansel called out, his voice echoing in the confined space. "I am here," Orthfol replied, his breathing apparatus wheezing in the dust-filled air. "But my equipment was damaged in the collapse. I am losing methane faster than normal. My suit's power systems are functioning, but several sensors are offline," Nyxora reported. "I cannot determine our exact location or the composition of the surrounding rock." "I am unharmed," Silouan said, though her voice carried worry. "But without sunlight, I will begin to weaken within hours." Hansel activated his emergency light, revealing a tunnel that stretched into darkness. The air was thick with dust and debris, making it difficult to breathe. His communication device crackled with static, unable to reach the surface through the collapsed rock. "Okay, we need to move deeper," Hansel said, making a decision that went against all standard survival protocols. "Okay, if we stay here, we will die slowly. If we move, we might find another way out." His teammates looked at him with expressions ranging from hope to fear. In galactic military training, the standard procedure was to stay in place and wait for rescue when trapped. But Hansel was thinking like a human from Earth, where staying in a death trap was never an option. They began moving through the tunnel system, with Hansel leading the way. His emergency light revealed ancient cave paintings on the walls, suggesting that this moon had once been inhabited by an intelligent species. The tunnels were too regular to be natural, carved with precision that spoke of advanced engineering. "These passages are artificial," Nyxora observed, her sensors picking up geometric patterns in the rock walls. "Someone built this tunnel system long ago. The question is, why?" Hansel replied, studying the cave paintings. The images showed creatures fleeing from something, seeking shelter in the underground passages. And what were they hiding from? The answer came sooner than expected. As they moved deeper into the tunnel system, Hansel's light reflected off. Something metallic, embedded in the wall, was clearly artificial, with smooth surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Do not touch it," Silouan warned, her plant-like senses detecting something dangerous about the object. "It feels wrong, like it is sleeping, but could wake at any moment." Hansel studied the object carefully. It looked like some kind of sensor or monitoring device, far more advanced than anything currently used by galactic civilization. As he watched, the pulsing light began to change rhythm, as if responding to their presence. "We need to move," Hansel said urgently. Now, the tunnel system began to change around them. Lights activated along the walls, creating a pathway that led deeper into the moon's interior. The air circulation improved, suggesting that ancient ventilation systems were coming online. Most disturbing of all, they began to hear sounds from behind them, mechanical sounds that suggested something was following. "What is happening?" Orthfol asked, his breathing apparatus struggling with the changing atmospheric conditions. "I think we triggered something," Hansel replied, pushing his team to move faster. "Some kind of automated system that has been dormant for who knows how long." The mechanical sounds grew louder and more numerous. Hansel's light revealed glimpses of movement in the shadows behind them, metallic shapes that moved with deadly purpose. Whatever these devices were, they had been designed to hunt and eliminate intruders. There, Silouan pointed ahead to where the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. "We can make a stand there." The chamber was vast, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. Ancient machinery lined the walls, much of it still functional after countless years. In the center of the chamber, a series of platforms connected by narrow bridges created a maze-like structure. "It's a fortress," Hansel realized. The original inhabitants built this place to defend against something. And now we are trapped inside with whatever they were fighting. The mechanical hunters emerged from the tunnels, their forms becoming clear in the artificial light. They looked like mechanical spiders, each one the size of a human, with multiple legs that moved in perfect coordination. Their bodies were covered in sensors and weapon systems designed for tracking and eliminating organic life. They are scanning. U.S., Nixara reported, her suit's sensors detecting the energy beams sweeping across their position. Multiple targeting systems are locking onto our biosignatures. Hansel looked at his 3 teammates, each of them struggling with a harsh environment and their own biological limitations. Above them, on the surface, rescue teams were probably searching for the trapped cadets, but the collapsed tunnels would make it impossible to reach them in time. We cannot outrun them, Hansel said, his mind racing through possible solutions, and we cannot hide from their sensors. But maybe we can outsmart them. How? Orthville asked, his breathing becoming more labored as his equipment continued to malfunction. These machines are ancient, Hansel explained, studying the mechanical hunters as they spread out to surround the chamber. They were designed to fight whatever species built this place, but they have never encountered humans before. We might be able to do things they are not programmed to expect. The hunt was about to begin, and Hansel knew that their survival would depend on tactics that no galactic military academy had ever taught. The mechanical hunters moved with deadly precision across the chamber floor, their multiple legs clicking against the ancient stone. Hansel counted at least 8 of them, each one armed with energy weapons that hummed with lethal power. Their sensors swept the area continuously, tracking every movement and heartbeat. They are coordinating their attack patterns, Nixara whispered, her suit's sensors analyzing the mechanical creatures. Each one is sharing information with the others. They are learning our positions and movement patterns. Hansel studied the hunters carefully, his mind processing everything he observed. On Earth, humans had learned to hunt creatures far larger and more dangerous than themselves. The key was never to fight on the enemy's terms, but to change the rules of engagement entirely. Orthville, how much methane do you have left in your breathing system? Hansel asked quietly. Perhaps 2 hours at current consumption rates, Orthville replied, his voice strained. Why do you ask? Butane is flammable, Hansel explained, beginning to form a plan. Siloween, can you create a bright flash of light using your photosynthetic abilities? Yes, but it would drain much of my stored energy, she replied, understanding beginning to dawn in her voice. You want to create a distraction. More than that, Hansel said, pointing to the maze of platforms and bridges above them. We are going to turn this ancient fortress into a trap. But first, we need to level the playing field. A pursed hunter approached their position, its sensors locked onto their heat signatures. Instead of running, Hansel did something that violated every rule of galactic military training. He picked up a loose stone and threw it directly at the machine. The stone struck the hunters, Colossus' central sensor array, with a satisfying crack. Colossus' coordination systems flickered for a moment, causing it to stumble. It was a small victory, but it proved an important point. They are advanced, but they are still machines, Hansel told his teammates, and machines can be broken. He began moving through the chamber, using the ancient machinery as cover. His teammates followed, trusting his judgment despite their fear. Hansel's movements were different from standard military tactics. Instead of seeking the safest route, he deliberately chose paths that would confuse the hunter's tracking systems. You're moving in patterns that make no tactical sense, Nixara observed, aquatic mind struggling to understand Hansel's strategy. Exactly, Hansel replied, diving behind a piece of ancient equipment as an energy beam scorched the air where he had been standing. These machines were programmed to fight logical opponents who follow predictable patterns, but humans learned to survive by being unpredictable. The hunters began to spread out, trying to surround the small group. Hansa led his team toward the platform system in the center of the chamber, but not in a direct line. He moved in seemingly random directions, sometimes doubling back, sometimes stopping for no apparent reason. The machines are recalculating their attack patterns, Nixara reported, her sensors detecting the confusion in the hunters' coordination signals. They cannot predict your next move, Kut Hansel said, reaching the base of the platform system. Now we go up. The ancient bridges and platforms created a three-dimensional maze suspended above the chamber floor. Hansel led his team upward, using his knowledge of basic physics to determine which structures were still stable. The hunters followed, their mechanical legs adapting to the vertical terrain. "This is madness," Orthful gasped, his breathing apparatus struggling with the physical exertion. "We are trapping ourselves with no escape route." "No," Hanzo replied, helping Silouin across a particularly narrow bridge. "We are leading them into our trap." At the highest platform, Hanzo stopped and turned to face the approaching hunters. His teammates looked at him with expressions of fear and confusion. They were cornered, with nowhere left to run. "Trust me," Hansel said, pulling out his emergency flare. "When I give the signal, Silouin, create the brightest flash you can. Orthful, release all your remaining methane at once. Ixara, be ready to provide covering fire with your suit's defensive systems." Because the hunters reached the platform level, their weapons charging for the final attack. Hansel waited until they were all in position, clustered together on the narrow bridges and platforms. Then he activated his flare and threw it into the center of the mechanical group. He shouted. Silouin released a brilliant flash of light that overloaded the hunter's optical sensors. Orthful emptied his methane reserves into the air, creating a flammable cloud around the confused machines. The combination of the flare's heat and the methane gas created a massive explosion that sent several hunters tumbling to the chamber floor below. "Impossible," Nixar whispered, watching as the remaining hunters struggled to reorient themselves. "You turned our weaknesses into weapons." "That is what humans do," Hansel replied, already moving toward the next phase of his plan. "We adapt." The explosion had damaged the platform system, but it had also revealed something important. The ancient machinery in the chamber walls was connected to the hunter's control systems. Hansel could see energy flowing through crystalline conduits that led to a central hub. There, he pointed to a large crystalline structure embedded in the far wall that is controlling the hunters. "If we can reach it, we can shut down the entire system." But between them and the control hub were the remaining hunters, now more cautious and alert. Hansel studied the chamber layout, looking for another advantage. His eyes fell on the ancient ventilation system that had activated when they first entered the tunnels. "The air circulation," he said, understanding, flooding his mind. "It is not just for ventilation. It is part of the defense system." Using techniques learned from Earth's most dangerous environments, Hansel began to manipulate the airflow in the chamber. He blocked certain vents and opened others, creating wind currents that carried dust and debris. The hunter's sensors began to malfunction as particles clouded their detection systems. "You're using the environment itself as a weapon," Silouin observed. "Kaya, plant-like senses detecting the changes in air pressure and flow. Earth taught us that everything in the environment can be used for survival," Hanzo replied, leading his team through the swirling dust clouds. "Even the air we breathe can become a tool." They reached the chamber wall, where the control hub pulsed with ancient energy. Hansel studied the crystalline structure, trying to understand how it functioned. The technology was far beyond current galactic standards, but the basic principles were recognizable. "It is a quantum processing matrix," Nixara said, her sensors analyzing the crystal's energy patterns. "Okay, but the quantum fields are unstable. Any disruption could cause a cascade failure. Or It could make things worse, Orthville warned, his breathing growing more labored without his methane supply. We do not understand this technology. Hansel looked at the control hub, then at his teammates who were struggling with their various biological limitations. Above them, the surface rescue teams were probably still trying to dig through the collapsed tunnels. Time was running out for all of them. Sometimes you have to take risks, Hansel said, remembering lessons learned in Earth's harsh environments. The biggest risk is doing nothing. He placed his hands on the crystalline surface of the control hub. The alien technology felt warm and alive, pulsing with energy that seemed to respond to his touch. The quantum fields fluctuated, causing the hunters to pause in their movements. It is reacting to your bioelectric field, Nixara observed. The crystal is reading your neural patterns. Then maybe I can communicate with it, Hansel said, focusing his thoughts on the simple concept of stopping the attack. To his amazement, the crystal began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The hunters suddenly stopped moving, their weapons powering down. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of ancient machinery. Hansel had done something that should have been impossible. He had communicated with technology that predated galactic civilization. The system is responding to you, Siloween said in wonder. He recognizes you as something different from the original inhabitants. Maybe, Hansel replied, maintaining contact with the crystal. Or maybe it just recognizes someone who refuses to give up. Through the crystal, he could sense the vast network of tunnels and chambers that honeycombed the moon's interior. Other cadets were trapped in different sections, facing their own mechanical hunters. The rescue teams on the surface were making progress, but too slowly. There are others, Hansel said, his connection to the crystal growing stronger. Dozens of other cadets are trapped throughout the system. The hunters are pursuing them too. His teammates looked at him with new understanding. What had started as a survival exercise had become something much larger. They were not just fighting for their own lives, but for the lives of their fellow cadets throughout the ancient underground complex. Can you stop all the hunters? Nixara asked. Hansel concentrated, trying to extend his influence through the crystal matrix. The technology was incredibly complex, but it seemed to respond to simple, direct thoughts. He focused on the concept of protection, of defending the innocent, of turning the hunters from predators into guardians. The crystal matrix pulsed with increasing intensity as Hansel and his teammates focused their combined life force into the ancient technology. Through the quantum connection, Hansel could sense the vast underground network spreading beneath. Zarian 7's surfaced like a spiderweb of tunnels and chambers. What he discovered made his blood run cold. This is not just a defense system, Hansel said, his voice tight with worry. It is a weapons platform. The entire moon is one massive weapon designed to destroy anything in orbit. The crystal showed him images from the ancient past. A proud civilization had built this moon as their final fortress against an enemy that had consumed their empire. The weapon system was designed to activate when enough life forms gathered in the tunnels, using their biological energy to power a devastating attack that could reach far into space. The Academy Station, Nixara whispered, understanding the implications. If this weapon activates, it will destroy Concordia and everyone aboard. Through the crystal, Hansel could see that the trapped cadets were not randomly scattered throughout the tunnel system. The hunters had been herding them toward specific chambers, gathering them into groups that would provide maximum energy for the ancient weapon. Every cadet who had been brought underground was now part of an involuntary power source for a doomsday device. How long until activation? Silouan asked, her plant-like senses detecting the growing energy levels in the crystal matrix. Hansel concentrated, trying to understand the alien technology. The countdown was displayed in symbols he could not read, but the rhythm of the crystal's pulsing told him everything he needed to know. 6 hours, he said, grimly. Maybe less. The system is drawing power from every life form in the tunnels. The more cadets the hunters capture, the faster it charges. Orthfell, who had been silent during their connection to the crystal, suddenly spoke up. My breathing apparatus is completely failed. I have perhaps 30 minutes of reserve air remaining. The situation was impossible by any reasonable standard. They were trapped underground with failing life support, facing an ancient weapon system that would destroy thousands of lives if activated. The logical response would be to focus on their own survival and hope that someone else could solve the larger problem. But Hansol was thinking like a human from Earth, where impossible situations were simply challenges that required creative solutions. We are going to stop it, he announced, his decision made. All of it. The weapon, the hunters, everything. How? Nixara asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to believe that Hansol might actually have a plan. By doing what the original builders never expected, Hansol replied, studying the energy patterns flowing through the crystal matrix. We are going to turn their own weapon against itself. Through the crystal connection, Hansol could access the moon's entire defense network. The system was incredibly sophisticated, but it had been designed by minds that thought differently from humans. The original builders had created a weapon that drew power from life force, but they had never considered what would happen if that life force actively resisted. Every cadet in these tunnels is connected to the system now, Hansol explained to his teammates. The hunters herded them here to use their biological energy. But what if we could coordinate all of them to resist at the same moment? Coordinate how? Silhouette asked. The communication systems are blocked by the rock and interference from the ancient technology. Hansol smiled, and his teammates recognized the expression that had become familiar over their time together. It was the look Hansol got when he saw a solution that no one else had considered. Through the crystal network itself, he said. The same system that is trying to drain their energy can carry messages. I can use the quantum connection to reach every cadet simultaneously. The plan was audacious, even by human standards. Hansol would need to maintain his connection to the crystal matrix while simultaneously reaching out to dozens of trapped cadets throughout the tunnel system. He would have to teach them how to resist the energy drain while coordinating a simultaneous effort to overload the weapon system. This strain could kill you, Nixara warned, her sensors detecting the massive energy flows required for such an attempt. Maybe, Hansol admitted. But if we do nothing, everyone dies anyway. At least this way, we have a chance. He began extending his consciousness through the crystal network, reaching out to the trapped cadets one by one. Each connection required enormous effort, but Hansol drew on reserves of determination that his alien teammates were only beginning to understand. The first cadet he reached was Kixandu, Kitherian, whose insectoid species was known for their logical approach to problems. Through the quantum link, Hansol could sense the cadet's confusion and fear as the hunters herded him toward an energy collection chamber. Kixandu, this is Hansol, he projected through the crystal network. K. Not be afraid. I need you to do exactly what I tell you. The connection was fragile and required constant focus. But Hansol managed to explain the situation and teach Kexandu how to resist the energy drain. Instead of allowing the system to siphon its life force, the Kitherian cadet learned to redirect it, creating feedback loops that disrupted the collection process. One by one, Hansol reached out to every trapped cadet. Each connection was more difficult than the last, as the effort drained his own energy reserves. His teammates watched with growing concern as Hansol's physical condition deteriorated under the strain. His vital signs are becoming critical, Nixara reported. Senators tracking Hansol's declining health. He cannot maintain this much longer. But Hansol pressed on, driven by the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through countless challenges on Earth. He reached cadets from dozens of different species. each one requiring a different approach to understand the resistance technique to the aquatic hydrants. He explained the process in terms of water currents and flow dynamics. For the crystalline Altarians, he used concepts of light refraction and energy resonance. The plant-based Verdanians understood when he described it as redirecting photosynthetic energy. Remarkable, Silouan observed, watching the energy patterns in the crystal matrix change as more cadets learned to resist. You are teaching each species in their own conceptual framework. Earth taught us that survival requires understanding, Hansel replied, though his voice was becoming weak from the effort. Every creature thinks differently, but every creature wants to live. As more cadets learned to resist the energy drain, the ancient weapon system began to malfunction. The builders had never anticipated active resistance from their power sources. The quantum matrix started to fluctuate wildly, causing system failures throughout the underground complex. The hunters are becoming confused, Orthful reported, though his own breathing was becoming increasingly labored. Their coordination protocols are breaking down. Han Saw could sense it too. The mechanical hunters were receiving conflicting commands as the weapon system struggled to process the unexpected resistance. Some hunters stopped moving entirely, while others began attacking each other in their confusion. Now comes the hard part, Hansel said, gathering his remaining strength for the final push. I need all the cadets to coordinate their resistance at exactly the same moment. We are going to create a feedback cascade that will overload the entire system. Through the crystal network, he reached out to every connected mind simultaneously. The effort was enormous, pushing Hansel beyond the limits of human endurance. His teammates could only watch as he poured everything he had into the quantum connection. On my mark, Hansel projected to all the trapped cadets. Everyone resist. With maximum force. 3, 2, 1, Now. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the ancient weapon system. Dozens of cadets simultaneously reversed their energy flow, sending massive feedback pulses through the crystal matrix. The quantum processors that had operated flawlessly for millennia suddenly found themselves processing contradictory data from every connected source. The weapon system began to tear itself apart from within. Energy conduits overloaded and burned out. Crystal matrices cracked under the strain. Throughout the underground complex, the mechanical hunters shut down as their control signals dissolved into chaos. It is working, Nixara shouted over the sound of collapsing machinery. The entire system is failing. But the victory came at a cost. Hansel collapsed, his body drained by the enormous effort of coordinating the resistance. K's teammates rushed to his side, checking his vital signs with growing alarm. He is alive, Silouan reported, but barely. It's a quantum connection drained. Too much of his life force. Above them, the sounds of the failing weapon system grew louder. Ancient machinery that had operated for thousands of years was shutting down permanently. The underground complex was becoming safe, but it was also becoming unstable as critical systems failed. The tunnels are collapsing, Orthful observed, his remaining air supply nearly exhausted. We need to reach the surface soon, or Hansal's sacrifice will be meaningless. Through the crystal matrix, now flickering and weak, they could sense that the trapped cadets throughout the complex were beginning to move toward the surface. The underground complex shook violently as ancient support systems failed one by one. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling while the crystal matrix flickered its final pulses of dying light. Hansel lay unconscious on the chamber floor, his breathing shallow and weak from the enormous effort of saving every cadet in the tunnel system. We must move him now, Nixara said, her mobility suit's sensors detecting increasing structural instability throughout the complex. The main support columns are beginning to crack. This entire section will collapse within minutes. Orthful knelt beside Hansel, his own breathing apparatus completely failed. Okay? He was surviving on the thin atmosphere alone, something that should have been impossible for his species. I cannot carry him far, he admitted. My strength is nearly gone. Silouane moved closer, her plant-like form glowing faintly in the dim light. Without the constant energy drain from the weapon system, she was beginning to recover some of her stored solar power. I can provide support, she said, but we need a way to reach the surface. The crystal matrix gave one final pulse before going completely dark, cutting off their connection to the tunnel network. They were truly alone now, trapped in the deepest part of a collapsing fortress with their unconscious leader, and no clear path to safety. But Hansal had taught them something during their time together. He had shown them that humans never accepted defeat, even when the situation seemed impossible. His teammates looked at each other and made a decision that would have amazed their instructors back at the academy. We do what Hanzo would do, Nixar declared. We find another way, using her suit's remaining power. Nixara scanned the chamber walls for any structural weakness that might lead to the surface. Her sensors detected air currents coming from a crack near the ceiling, suggesting there was an opening above them. There, she pointed to the crack. But it is too high and too narrow for normal access. Silouane studied the problem with her plant-like intelligence. The ancient machinery, she said, indicating the failing equipment around the chamber. Some of it is still powered. We can use it to reach the crack. Working together, despite their biological limitations, the three aliens began to implement a plan worthy of their human teammate. Orthful, drawing on reserves he did not know he possessed, helped position pieces of ancient technology to create a makeshift climbing structure. Silouane used her remaining energy to weld metal components together with focused light beams. Nixara's mobility suit provided the precision needed to secure their improvised ladder as they worked. The sounds of rescue operations began to filter down from above. The surface teams had finally broken through the outer tunnel collapses and were making progress toward the trapped cadets. But they were still too far away to reach the deepest chambers before the final collapse. "Can you hear us?" came a voice through the comm system, crackling with static, but clearly human. It was Commander Jamin Park, Hansal's fellow human and military advisor at the academy. "Commander Park," Nixara responded, boosting her suit's transmission power. "We are in the central chamber of the weapon system. Hansal is unconscious. The complex is collapsing." "Hold your position," Commander Park replied. "We are cutting through the upper levels now. Dr. Sujin Lee is with us, okay? She can treat Hansal once we reach you." "It's negative," Nixara said, surprising herself with a firm decisiveness in her voice. She was thinking like Hansal now, seeing solutions instead of obstacles. "Cannot wait. The chamber will collapse before you reach us. We are coming to you." "Okay." Through the static, they could hear Commander Park's shock. Standard protocol called for trapped personnel to remain in place and wait for rescue. But Hansal had taught them that sometimes survival required breaking the rules. "You were injured and in a hostile environment," Commander Park protested. "Stay put. That is an order." "With respect, Commander," Orthful said, speaking into the comm with his failing voice. "We learned from the best human teacher. We are not staying put." Their improvised ladder reached the crack in the ceiling. Silouane, being the lightest, went first to scout the passage above. She found a narrow ventilation shaft that angled upward toward the surface, barely wide enough for a single person to crawl through. "It will be a difficult climb," she reported, "but it leads toward the rescue teams." The hardest part was moving. Hansal, working together. They created a rescue sling using materials from Nixara's mobility suit and Orthful's breathing apparatus. The human was completely unconscious, but his teammates were determined to save the person who had saved him. The climb through the ventilation shaft was exhausting and dangerous. The passage was barely stable, with sections that crumbled as they passed through. Orthful, weakened by oxygen deprivation, had to be helped by the others. Skillowin, drained of her stored energy, could barely generate enough light to see the path ahead, but they pressed on, carrying their unconscious human teammate through passages that seemed impossible to navigate. Every few meters, they had to stop and readjust their grip on Hansal's rescue sling, ensuring that he would not fall back into the collapsing depths below. "I can see light ahead," Nyxora reported, her senses detecting the artificial illumination of rescue equipment. "The surface teams are close." The final section of the climb was the most treacherous. The ventilation shaft opened into a larger tunnel where rescue crews were working to clear debris. As Hansal's teammates emerged from the narrow passage, carrying their unconscious leader, the rescue teams stopped their work in amazement. "Possible," whispered one of the Githerian rescue specialists. They climbed through a passage that, our equipment said, was too narrow and unstable for travel. Commander Park rushed forward as they lowered Hansel to the tunnel floor. Dr. Sujin Lee immediately began medical treatment, checking his vital signs and administering emergency care. "His life force is extremely depleted," Dr. Lee reported, her medical scanners revealing the extent of Hansal's sacrifice. "He channeled more quantum energy than any human should be able to survive, but he is stable." As the rescue teams worked to evacuate everyone to the surface, word spread throughout the tunnel system about what had happened. The trapped cadets, now safely moving toward extraction points, learned that a single human cadet had coordinated their rescue by turning an ancient weapon system against itself. "He reached every one of us," reported Kixandu, the Githerian cadet who had been among the first to learn the resistance technique. "Through the crystal network, he taught us how to fight back. I have never seen anything like it." The evacuation to the surface took several hours, but eventually all the trapped cadets were safely aboard rescue ships. Hansel remained unconscious during the journey back to the Academy station, but his teammates never left his side. When Hansel finally awakened in the Academy Medical Center 3 days later, he found his room filled with visitors. Cadets from dozens of species had come to thank the human who had saved their lives. But what amazed him most was seeing his 3 teammates standing together, no longer struggling with their biological limitations. "How are you all surviving so well?" Hansel asked, noting that Orthvel was breathing normally without his apparatus and Silowin seemed energetic despite the lack of direct sunlight. "You taught us to adapt," Nyxara explained. "During our time in the tunnels, we learned to push beyond what we thought were our limits." Orthvel discovered he could process oxygen more efficiently when necessary. Silowin found ways to store energy more effectively. We all became stronger. Captain Morton, the Academy's commanding officer, Keed, entered the medical bay with a formal expression that gradually softened into something resembling amazement. Cadet Hansal, the insectoid officer, said, "Your actions during the survival exercise have been reviewed by the Galactic Military Command. What you accomplished should have been impossible by any known tactical doctrine." Hansal tried to sit up, but Dr. Lee gently pushed him back down. "I just did what seemed necessary, sir. You coordinated a multi-species resistance operation, using ancient alien technology that no one understood." Captain Morton continued, "You turned a routine training exercise into the largest rescue operation in Academy history. Your methods are being studied by military strategists across the galaxy." Through the medical bay window, Hansal could see other cadets going about their daily routines on the Academy station. But something had changed. Human cadets, once viewed with curiosity and mild concern, were now being approached by aliens seeking to learn from them. "The galaxy is beginning to understand, Commander," Park said, entering the room with a proud smile. "Humans do not just survive impossible situations, we turn them into opportunities. Your actions here will change how the military academies train cadets from all species." Ambassador Keelet H., the ethereal, void-born diplomat, materialized in the room with her characteristic shimmer of displaced space. The Galactic Council has authorized the establishment of new training programs based on human survival techniques, she announced. They want to understand how your species consistently achieves the impossible.